Good afternoon and welcome to Innovation Alley. I'm Tim O'Rourke, Chief Technical Officer, and I'm pleased today to say that we're going to cover a part two of a podcast on collaborative delivery, right? Part one, we were actually out at your construction site for a new water reclamation facility, and we got in and dove into a lot of the details on the evolution of collaborative delivery and where it's going. But before we dive into part two, let's reintroduce ourselves for those that might not have seen part one, starting with Andy. Go ahead, Andy.
I'm Andy Franosz. I'm the Director of Client Services for Weight Trim. Recently joined Weight Trim. Been in the industry for over 30 years, primarily as a contractor and utilizing these delivery methods we're talking about today.
And I'm Colin Groff. I'm the Utility Director for St. Johns County and have been in this industry for about 35 years. Completed a lot of design-build type projects and a lot of just water and wastewater projects. And I'm really glad to hear to talk about some things we're going to look at in the future, ways we can deliver projects better for our customers.
Yeah, and as we did last time, we kind of talked about how design bid build is the relatively recent delivery model compared to historical construction evolution, right, going back centuries, millennium even, and we talked about the Brooklyn Bridge and other types of delivery models that had been done previously, and now we're moving back towards that direction with collaborative delivery. So today we kind of want to take it into the next levels of where it's going, some of the lessons learned, some of the funding challenges and how some of that can be tackled. But the other thing I had asked you, Colin, is you did a great job explaining to the average person the benefits of a utility director using this delivery model and how you employ it and how your vision is carried out. And I asked you, do you share all this with other utilities, and is there kind of a fraternity of sorts for this, and how you see this going? And
that's a great question. We do, when I kind of got in the utility business 30 years ago and did my first project, and I worked under design build, but we didn't call it that. So when I got in the utility business, somebody said, let's do this design build. I really didn't know. So I went to a conference, DBIA conference. I think it was maybe number 2 or number 3 that they did. It was a fairly new organization to do design build.
Right.
And I went to the conference, and it was a national conference, and I said, well, who here works for an owner or a utility? And there was probably only 10 of us there out of 1,000 people that were there.
Wow. Yeah.
And so there wasn't very many people doing it. So we got into it. We had an owners panel. So that's where I kind of started. But those organizations are the way we as owners get together. So now we actually have what we call an owners council, where it's just owners. We get together, we talk. We've been doing over the last 20 years a lot of educational stuff. So the way we work as owners, we actually work together as utilities. We are competitors. People think you're government. How do you compete? We do compete with other utilities because if our rates are too high, people don't move here, people don't open their businesses, people go someplace else.
That's the competition, is the better service.
It's a better service, so we do compete, but we also understand we're in the same business, so we work together. So a lot of it is you will get calls through the organizations or through, hey, you've done this type of project, how did you deliver it, how do you do it? And we reach out and we help each other. So, this year alone, I've probably worked on 2 or 3 projects with other utilities, helping them get it set up and how do you go forward. Now, I don't do the work for them, but it's advice, and then I reach out to other utilities. How did you do this? So that's how we get together.
So we share lessons learned,
and we share lessons learned. We do it in conferences. We do it on phone. We have committees that we get together and meet and talk about things that better ways we can do things.
Can you give an example of where that was applied?
So absolutely. So there was a project recently that it was a utility that's been around for a long time, but they never really did design build, and so I happen to know the person who took the job to kind of run the project. So he called me and said, I know you've done a lot of this. We want to do this. I'm not going to mention the utility, but we want to do this. And we got talking about it. I said, well, why do you want to use, what the delivery method you want to use? They were looking at CMAR, construction manager risk. They were looking at that. I said, why do you want to use, what's your end product? And we started talking through the issues. And in reality, what they really needed was progressive design build, because what they needed is they didn't want to spend a lot of money on a DCP package, a design criteria package. What they want to do is get to the market and get somebody on board to start designing. And so I was able to help them explain how that worked within the law, and I was able to provide them some contracts and some RFPs that were written around that they could copy. That's how we collaborate on the owner side, is we share the things we do, because it's all public record.
Right.
It's all open record, so we can share it. So we share those things. and none of us create something new. We all take from each other, and we keep perfecting it. So that's kind of how that works.
Can you think of a lesson that you learned from reaching out?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, when I started 30 years ago doing this, all of my lessons were learned from people who were doing it. I met a guy from California. California was a little bit ahead of Florida, and they were doing some work, and it was fascinating to listen because the first thing I saw, I said, "You mean the engineer and the contractor work together?" And I said, that's the way I grew up in the private sector. That's the way it always worked. But when I came to the public sector, I had to learn this bid thing, and this bid thing drove me nuts, but I didn't think there was any other way to do it. Right. So what I learned is there is another way to do it, but I've learned even when I'm helping somebody, I'm learning from them. Right. I mean, you learn stuff. I mean, every time you do a project, you learn new ways of doing things, and you learn it by collaborating with other people. I also learn a lot from the industry. Andy and I, we've talked about things, and I learned things from him. I mean, just last night we were talking.
Learned something from him?
I actually learned something from him, that I didn't know.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting for that first thing. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. But we do learn. We meet and we talk. A lot of times it's just casual. We talk to each other and
well, it's a people business at the end of the day.
It's a people business. We do this because we work well together. That's the best team. I mean, I think the example is risk registries. I probably had worked on 50 or 60 projects before I really knew what a risk registry was, and it was a project that was about 6 years ago. The company, it was the team that came in and said, "Hey, we want to show you how we're going to manage our contingency. We're going to manage it with this risk registry." I said, "What is that?" And they showed me, and I said, "This is the best idea I've ever seen." It was like this is what we've been needing for 20 years.
Yeah, I got exposed to a risk register the first time like 20 years ago. Oh. And I'm a big fan, right? And to me, I always try to give advice to the engineers around me that it's a great design decision tool. It is an incredible design decision tool because you're not avoiding a risk, you're actually accepting that it's there.
Oh, absolutely.
What we're going to do to mitigate it, and everyone buys into the decision going forward. And you mentioned last time about I'm willing to take a little more risk.
Right.
As the utility than you may be as the engineer. We're going to document this process of this decision through the risk register process.
Or if you push it to the contractor, they're going to price it. Colin, you bring up a point saying that, as utilities, you're competitors. But, in a different perspective, from a contractor perspective, for years, you guys were competing for us, too, so to speak.
Right.
The owners that would embrace the more progressive ways, the more collaborative ways, when jobs were easier. You kind of gravitated towards those.
That's a good point.
Owners.
I actually learned something from you, Andy, today.
That's two.
No, he's right. I never looked at it that way. That great contractors are in competition, but utility owners want the best.
You got to have a good project and a good team to work with for contractors to be attracted. Right. Why do I want to, as a contractor, come in and make 5%? The hard way when I can make
a painful 5%.
And a painful 5% when I could work with somebody and have an enjoyable project and hopefully develop a relationship to have return work.
That is probably the most important thing for government leaders to learn. That you need the private sector, and you have to be attractive to the private sector.
You have to market yourself.
I look back 2011. I know we're not going to go back, but 2011, I could put out a job and I get 100 bidders because nobody had work.
Right.
That is very rare, though, in this market. That just happened to be 1 year. But as soon as that year passed, all of a sudden now you've got to be friendly again.
It's selective.
There was a year where you could be really mean to contractors, and they'd still work for you. But now you can't. I mean, if you're not a good client, you're not going to get the good contractors. And not only that, you're going to come in with an adversarial point, even in design build a little bit. I mean, I've seen people go out. If they go out with the wrong kind of RFP or they're asking for the wrong things, you don't get the good companies coming in.
No, right.
So for us, you talk about how we collaborate. I spend a lot of time with other utility directors, and we talk about what do we do to make ourselves attractive in the market so we get better contractors. Yeah. Because we need them. We can't do our job without good contractors.
And they obviously need you.
And we have the money. So they need us.
It goes back to a point that you had brought up in our last discussion, and that was perfecting. You said a couple of the challenges. One of the challenges being going to contract. Getting those contracts involved where they're very equitable, both for you as a client, the contractor, or the design builder, and having that ability to refine that amongst other utilities really is a benefit to really improve this industry as a whole.
And that's actually exactly what happens.
And it's contagious, right? Yeah. Success breeds success, right?
And that is what's happening. I mean, you can see, when I did that project where I learned about the risk register, it wasn't in contracts, but there was another utility that had done it, and they had put it in their contract. So I was able to get that language and put it into the contract. So that's how we work together, and we find better ways to do it, and we continue to do that. And it's amazing. Even now, when I have a project coming up, I haven't done that particular type of project. I just look for somebody who has, and I say, give me all your documents. Let me copy what you have good out of those. So that's how we work together.
Yeah,
and I think that's the future we're going to get in this business, and especially I think collaborative delivery is going to be the future, and you can see it growing. It's 50% of the projects now.
I think it's over.
And I think it's because it's coming to the point where it's the only way to build a project, because you low bid, you don't have enough bidders out there. So you're not getting low bid.
Right.
And so people are starting to see it's really not a good way to deliver a project, unless it's a very simple project. There are some projects that it makes sense, but it's not very many.
There's no enhancement or value engineering potential. Or
so I think we have to work together to get better in the future to make the process better. And there's things we need to improve. There's absolutely things we need to improve in the whole industry. We talk all the time about, well, Florida's fairly aggressive in our laws on what we can do.
Yeah.
But other states aren't.
Right.
I mean, we really need to be pushing toward a national kind of standard for design build. So we use the same terminology. We do it the same way, because for me as a utility, it opens up my market of where I can go to get people. Because now I can go to other states and all that. Right now, if I want somebody, I really want them from Florida, because they got to understand how we work in Florida.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, when you look at the United States, it's 50 jurisdictions at the state level, and then you've got counties,
municipal level,
and everybody changes does it differently. So I think the push for more of a national, because design bid build is not that way. I mean, there's a little bit of differences around the edges, but when you bid a project, and it really doesn't matter what state you're in.
Right.
And so I do think that's something that the industry in the future we need to work toward, is how do we. Because I think we're figuring out how to do this transparently and honestly and above board and fairly.
When you say we, who's the entity?
We, as the owners, as the people who work for the taxpayer or for the customer.
Right.
Those of us, whether it's general government or utilities or enterprise funds, we represent the customer, the taxpayer. They pay us to represent them to get the best project. And so when I say we, it's we as the public.
You have a defensible procurement methodology.
We need a defensible procurement, because people want to know, are you using our money properly?
Correct.
And that's why when we talked about it in the last session, we talked a little bit about why did hard bid come around. My belief is because if you don't have a transparent thing, people push for something that's more transparent.
Yeah.
So I think we have the tools now to do it, and we need to move the industry in that way.
And Florida's very transparent.
Florida, I think, is a good. Florida's a good model.
Yeah.
Good model.
Do we still make mistakes? Yes. We learn on every single procurement we do. We learn something we want to do a little bit better.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing. And I keep thinking, man, I've been doing this for 35 years. You think I know how to do this, but learn on every one.
It's the quest for perfect, not becoming perfect. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But projects do lend themselves, certain projects do lend themselves to tweaking those things, because it's very project specific, some of these things, the choices on how to deliver, and also the complexities change from project.
So another phenomenon that we all know is going on now, right? The investment in infrastructure in America in general, right?
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of sources of investment happening, not just at the public level. There's a lot of private funding and equity, entities trying to get into this game, and the best way to get into the game and how to learn and adapt to it. So, Andy, you and I were talking a little bit, we mentioned to Colin about using private funds in this with public partnerships, which isn't a new idea.
No, it's not.
But
Absolutely not.
It's not. But we're starting to see now private partnerships. How do you see that all playing in the collaborative delivery at a municipal level with the private use of funds going? I mean, it's not new. But is it evolving, and is it going?
I think it is, and I think part of it is there's, and I'm probably going to say things here that people won't like, but part of the problem we have in the utility business right now is people want to invest in infrastructure, but everybody think it has to be government money. So the government has just dumped money into the market, and all it's done is make it harder for us to get our projects built. The free money from the federal government isn't free, and it just makes it harder. I think the better solution is let the private funds, which are already out there, you're not creating money, you're not printing money, it's money that already exists, so it doesn't increase your cost. Free money increased your cost. So I think by capturing that equity that's already in the market into something. People want to invest in utilities. Why? It's long term. It's a residual for 30, 40, 50 years. When you build a plant, it's there for 80 years, producing revenue.
Well, and it's an ongoing need that never goes away.
And it never goes away. Until we figure out how not to use the toilet, it's never going to go away.
Well, that would be the end of our species.
And that would probably be the end of our species. So we don't want to really go there. That's not the future we want to go to. But I think we do need to look at how do we capitalize on that equity. And utilities is one of the better ways to do it, but it's one of the last areas going into it. These public-private partnerships with private equity funding of public infrastructure, and the university system's been around for a while.
Universities have been using it.
They build dorms, because they have a revenue. Transportation's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Why? You can put a toll on the road, they can collect. Utilities a little bit differently, but you do have a revenue source. You have a stream of revenue every month, and you're going to borrow the money anyways, so why not stretch that and do a better job? I think that's where we're going in the future, is figuring out how to. I think we took a wrong path when 20 years ago we started using design, build, finance, and operate, and we threw the operations in. Mm-hmm. And again, private companies may not. There's not a lot of in a public setting. Private companies don't operate very well. Just like government does a really poor job in the private sector.
Why is that?
We're just not. Government's not set up to operate for a profit. We are set up to serve the public.
Right.
It's a different where a private company, yes, you serve the public, but you serve the public for a profit.
Right.
So it's a different mindset. Private operations has just not worked in this country because there's not a good way to measure, to ensure, because utilities have to be maintained. You can't just put money in utility and then operate it for 30 years and then walk away. That's what the private operations did.
And you know this better than anyone. I was a public works director at one time in my life too. Is you're drinking on a fire hose some days and you thought you had a plan. It's like the whole you have a plan till you get hit.
That's right.
It's hard when you're working strictly for the bottom line to be nimble enough to be able to adjust and handle.
And so
you said serving the public. I think that says it well, right?
Right. And that's so I think the operations side kind of sidetracks a little bit in these public-private. So I think the push now in the future is going to be design, build, finance, where you bring in a financing
and leave the
team and let the utility operate. Utilities are good at operating utilities. That's what we specialize in. Right. We're not good at raising money. That's not what we do. We're also probably not too good at building new infrastructure. That's why we need private contractors. Right. So combining the contract team that knows how to do that with a financing team that knows how to do that with the operations group that knows how to serve the public, that's the partnership that works.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And there's a lot of benefits too, because it doesn't go into your when you're doing these private financing, if you do it the right way, it doesn't go into your debt service.
Right.
It doesn't go into those numbers, so you're able to stretch those monthly revenue dollars further
for other use.
Other uses.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of benefits. Now, does it work on every project? No, it's not one size fits all. That's the mistake we make. We try to do one size fits all. It's not. Mm-hmm. But this private, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's probably 5 or 6 different ways to do it in a utility. And I think that's where we're going to go. I think we're seeing more and more of it. I think as new regulations come down, that we're going to see more of it because utilities are going to need it. They're going to need that access to that. And the equity companies, it's great for them because they're interested.
It's a steady income stream.
It's a steady income stream. Yeah, you may make a little bit less every year, but it's guaranteed for 30 years.
Yeah, it's 30 years.
It's a little bit better than a bond.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
so it is
because you can build inflation rates into them. You can build some other things into them. So it's a win-win if you do it right.
And it gives you, as a utility, flexibility to use your operating capital for other things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it allows us to build our team because the operations side then takes your team off it too.
Exactly.
And so it allows you to do what you're good at, which is serving the public in operations, and let other people do what they're good at, which is investing money.
Yeah, that all makes sense. That's great. So collaborative delivery in general, there's different types of systems being used. You've mentioned transportation, there's vertical construction, and there's obviously this stuff we saw today with the wastewater plant, and underground, utilities and all the like. Is one lend itself more towards collaborative delivery than the other, or is it equally applied across?
I think my opinion is it's equally applied, but it's not equal to every project. So I think it's very, you have to ask your question, what am I trying to do here? And that really brings you to what your delivery method is. So if you have, in utilities, and I'll stick to utilities a little bit here. So if you have a pipe project you got to put in a mile of pipe, 12-inch force main, and it's along the right of way, That's actually pretty easy to design. There's not a lot of complications to it. And you have what you call general services engineers that work for you. They're under contract. So it's very quick to say, okay, design this line, here's $100,000, give me the plans, and then go out to bid, and I've got 5 small utility contractors that can put in a mile of line. That's a design bid build type project because it's very straightforward. There's not a lot of, you're not going to save money. It is what it is.
Okay, so Colin, in my world, those pipes being run a few miles, my last 20 years, those were 24 foot in diameter.
Yeah, now that's what I'm saying with 12-inch pipe.
Right,
24-inch diameter
Now you're
pipe.
getting into deep, large tunnels with huge pump stations on the end. I remember the pushback was, that has to be design bid build because of the risk profile. But I'm seeing that change.
No, and I think that's where
that's moving more towards collaborative delivery.
I think collaborative delivery. That's where.
So explain to our.
Absolutely, I think as the bigger, more complex projects, the risk, the problem with the hard bid world is the risk is all bid into the project.
Right.
And the risk, you say, well, the risk is there. Yes, it's real risk, but it may not be realized on the project. So when it's not realized, where does that money go? Well, it's nice for the contractor because it's more profit. Now, does the contractor take risk too? Yes, they could lose that profit, but they're not going to lose everything because they've built it into their bid.
Right.
So I think on the more, and the other problem too is
and they all build it in.
They all build it in.
No one's going to try to buy the job in that scenario with the risk because they can go out of business.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
it can end your company,
yeah,
right?
nobody's
Right
going to do that. Right. And I think sometimes as public people, we don't understand that. But you have to understand that.
That's
They're
an
going to
important
bid
point,
it in.
Colin, because the perception is this contractor bought the job, but in reality,
nobody buys jobs.
No. Yeah.
No, what they do
and this is a contractor
Here's
job.
what
That's the third thing I've learned from Andy today.
Well, here's something I learned from Andy and from other contractors. One of the things, when a contractor bids a job, what are they looking at?
Yeah.
So this is, and I'm going to simplify this, and Andy's probably going to disagree with me, but I'm going to simplify. They don't look at the job as, how am I going to build this efficiently? What they look for is what's missing in the plans that I can do a change order on. And then I can take that money out of my bid so I can win the bid, and then I'm going to hit them with a change order. So they're looking at the plans to find mistakes instead of looking at the plans how to do it better. Now, I probably simplified that a little bit, right?
No,
but
I mean,
that is exactly how contractors look at it.
And in all honesty, the years.
Wait a minute, did you do that?
He's not going to admit it, but
the years when there was 10 contractors showing up at a pre-bid, and you had to look for the edge, and the edges were what is missing, because everybody's at that point hungry. And you had no opportunity to see the unforeseen conditions. You have no opportunity to see if there's efficiencies. How long do you guys give us, or in the old days give us?
20 days.
Six weeks was a luxury. Yeah. You can't look at a $50 million project and in 6 weeks captured all the efficiencies. You do that afterwards. So you look at the opportunities first, to make yourself whole. So that way you've got the potential to finish that project and not go out of business on it.
Right. So so the complicated project, you build in that cost. And then so you have to ask your question, am I doing the right thing for my customer? And the answer is no. You're not doing the right thing for your customer. Right. It may be transparent and it may take all the responsibility off you.
You as the owner own the risk ultimately. Anyway,
we own the risk anyway. Yeah. So yes, does it make your job easier? Heck yeah, because if I don't have to go back, if it's a change order driven by the contractor, that's not my fault. Right. That's the engineer's fault. You can blame somebody. Yeah. Collaborative delivery, it gets you better value because you don't have that, because you work together to work those out. And then on the risks, as you go through the project, you can eliminate risk. We use a risk registry for the contingency. Mm-hmm. And every month we go through there, okay, what risks are done? And then we take that money, and guess where that money goes? It goes back into my pocket, and I put it back in the project because I have a list of optional items. I go over there and say, here's some things I'd really like to have in this project, but I can't afford it. So when we don't need this contingency, let's put it over there and build that.
So for our viewers, we're all risk register pros, right? Yeah. So you've done post-mitigated risk has some value to it that you're carrying a contingency. All those individual risks have a number to it.
They all have a number, and they're all carried.
And they all carry down to the bottom, and that $180 million job's got $23 million of contingency baked into the risk, whatever the numbers are.
Right.
Maybe it's half of that. But as you get past that risk, you deallocate.
We deallocate that money into other things. Now, if it's money I'm holding, I can
You can't do that in a normal contract.
You can't.
You can't.
There is no way to do it.
There's no mechanism for it.
I mean, I did a project one time, and it was not a huge project. It was I think it was like a $30 million GMP, and our contingency on it was about, it was probably $2 to $3 million contingency. we as a city held it all because you know what, we're going to take the risk.
It's
and we'll hold the
encumbered funds. You
contingency.
can't use.
It's
for
encumbered
anything.
funds, so I encumbered it. By the end of the project, we actually did the project through all the savings we found for $26 million. So that $4 million, because the contractor was holding some too. So their $4 million or so that it was being held in contingency came back out, and we built $4 million more of stuff on the project. So it was still a $30 million project, but we got a LED changeable light colored water tower that the public went nuts over because every holiday it would give you a different color. We did it for sports teams and all that. We did an art piece in a park that was
truly
gorgeous.
found value.
And we found value in that.
Yep.
We built a clinic for the employees. Now, who's heard of that? We were building a water plant, but we said, well, we got this money, we got space, let's build a clinic.
Yeah.
And you can do that when you start up front and you do it collaboratively through the projects. And everybody loved it because the contractors, remember, they have to make a profit. In design build, they make their profit on their design build fee. If they spend less money, they get less fee. So I said, well, I'm not going to give you less fee. I'm going to build more stuff.
Right.
Building more stuff is good.
And it's got to be, because I'm looking at the arc of my career, and it's been antagonistic at times with engineers and contractors and owners in this threesome of fighting over the risk allocation.
That's right.
That this is improving relations and making the job more fun. Right?
I think it even trickles down to where...
Because we're not bad people on any end of this.
No,
it's just
not at all.
You're representing the interest.
But I think as various staff within municipalities get exposed to a design build project, collaborative project here, once they go back to that traditional design, it's not quite as adversarial because the trust levels are now developed. When you were talking about projects suited, thought that comes to my head is that projects that as the stakeholder involvement grows, the more stakeholders you have, the more that suits that project to something that's collaborative.
Well, that's
because
true.
you can really serve the needs of all.
Have you
those
involved
folks.
outside stakeholders into
We
the
do.
collaboration?
Absolutely.
Can you give an example of that?
There was I've had so many projects, I've got to think of one. So we did it, and I'm going to get outside utilities now a little bit. So we'll talk about a vertical construction project.
Okay, let's do it.
And it was actually a P3 project. So it was we had private equity funding on it. So it was a design build, though. It was progressive design build. But there was a lot of permitting involved for utilities, for vertical construction, for pipelines, for roadways. And so our very first, what we did is we said, okay, team, you have to bring these agencies, an entity, somebody from that agency into these meetings up front, very first. And so we had somebody from DEP there. We had somebody from the gas people there. We had somebody from the road. So we brought these agencies in, and they were actually part of the project. They became a team member.
And
Our own permitting. So, I was in a city, and we had a building department. So we said, okay, building official, assign a plan reviewer to this project, and we're going to bring them into every meeting. So when we're looking at the plans, they're looking at the plans, and they're fixing things.
Think about the difficulty you would have had if you had to do that in a traditional delivery method.
We built 4 buildings, and remodeled a complete historic building. We moved everybody out of old buildings, tore them down, built brand new buildings, moved everybody back in 18 months. From the time we started the design to the time we moved back into the buildings.
Sounds like the beauty of this too, because we are talking construction, so it's not all wine and roses.
It's not all wine and roses. We had a hurricane,
and that was when S happens, and it does happen. I think what's cool about your examples is, but everyone was involved in the decision process,
everybody
and collaboration. So it's not doing this.
Yeah.
Well, but it's also doing things like, we talked about at the previous podcast, we were on a job site where you're running permitting, you're running design, constructability, pricing, your price models, all in parallel.
Yeah.
If you try to do that in a traditional method, it's all linear, and all of a sudden that grows in time.
Yeah.
Well, think about the cost of the time value of money. Is $1 worth $1 today? Yes. What's it worth in 5 years?
Well, particularly in today's world.
In a volatile market.
Yeah.
So I think the efficiency of the delivery model, also allowing these parallel tracks to be developed and these stakeholders to be included, I think there's a big efficiency in what you're spending. I think that, as Colin mentioned, serving the public. That is the best stewardship of the money.
I think the example too is I was just talking about that project. COVID hit. We were 60% through construction when COVID hit. You know how many days we lost? Zero.
gonna say
You know
zero.
why we lost 0 days is because the minute we heard it coming, we were in the room working together. So what are we going to do
Figure
if this
it out.
becomes bad?
Yep.
And we came up with plans in place so nobody had to stop. And
How fast did it hit once you? I mean,
well, I mean, if you
saw it
remember,
coming,
you know,
right?
we
I mean,
saw it coming in the end of January, and by the middle of February, it shut down all the businesses.
Yeah.
So it was like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But we were ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We saw it coming. We looked at the worst case and said, "What is it?" We brought in a couple of experts. You know, the team was able to bring in experts because we were a collaborative team.
Yeah.
We brought it. We said, "Hey, we'll pay. You bring in a doctor, we'll pay for it.
Yeah.
Put in the thing, bring it in. Tell us how do we make this site safe."
Wow.
They came in. We came up with a plan, and we didn't miss a day. In fact, we didn't even have anybody
Under
that had to go
stress
home.
conditions like that.
Yeah, we didn't have anybody quarantined. We didn't have any of that. We got the project done, and it was because we worked together. And the future, that's the way we're going to have to deliver projects. We're going to have to do it that way to deliver these big, complex projects.
Baptism by fire, and that.
I think
kind
the
of
other part, too, is it's not just big, complex projects. We're working on getting out, and other communities have done it. We're looking on these general services design build contracts where you pick a couple of teams for your small stuff. You have an engineer and a contractor says, "Hey, I need 500 feet of force main," and they go get it done.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're going to get it done quicker. You're going to get it done cheaper.
And the efficiency to, again,
Right.
get constructability during design. You're not making mistakes.
Yeah. So I think that's where the future is going, is really moving into that real, true collaborative. And we have work to do. We got to learn how to do it better. We have to work together to make the processes work better. We have to take advantage of this future equity market that's out there and learn how to use it in our utilities. And I think that's where we're going in this field.
And it's
Why not
changing quickly. I mean, right? You're seeing
It
it
is.
become more and more prevalent.
Well,
So-
why not take advantage of people that are willing to lend money that are good at making money? I
Right.
mean, you know, the perception is that it's going to cost me more.
It
not
doesn't.
Not if they know how to do it more efficiently. You're paying a rate.
Yeah. No
I
doubt.
just finished an SRF funding project, and if I run the number, I'm paying about 9% interest on it. It was advertised at 1%, but when I add all the extra costs, that's what I'm paying. It's not a good deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Government generally is not there to make you a good deal. So
Well, it's not the lifeblood of it.
Right.
No.
so
Now, so believe it or not, we're running out of time. But we've learned so much in these two parts about your views of how it's all evolved, and we truly did bring in an expert,
Yeah.
which is good, and a guy who's taught us 3 things this morning.
that's right. 3 things.
Pretty good in 30 minutes.
That's really good. So I think we want to start bringing it to a close. So, Andy, why don't you give some closing thoughts on today's activity and where you're at with all of it?
Overall, I mean, it's good to see that there is a level of commitment coming with a different perspective of, we talked about it last time. We don't lose control, we gain more control. We're part of the process, we're being better stewards. We are truly transparent because at the end of the day, who wants to be part of a project that everybody's doing this on?
Absolutely.
Everybody wants to be part of a project that you can say, this is a keystone project for the community, for me, for my career, for my constituents, for the environment. And I think this methodology, this delivery method really helps that.
Yeah, for us that have been involved in that for
Yes.
decades and decades.
Yes.
I guess and I agree with everything, and I'm going to agree with everything you said. The only other thing I would add is I wish this had evolved quicker in my career than it actually did. Right?
Yeah,
'Cause,
I agree.
I would have loved to have been doing this for 20 or 30 years,
Yeah.
where you're actually building the thing with everyone involved.
Well, we have to get out there and
From thought to
educate people.
finish, right?
Yeah.
The
I
idea.
think that's it, the key.
We have to get out there and
the
educate people. We have to see it
Yeah.
to believe it.
And that's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing.
So, Colin, why don't you, for our viewers, bring it home?
Yeah, so I think this is a great topic because I think it is the future. We're seeing it grow every year, and we as owners and people who serve the public, we have to understand we need to find better ways to do what we do. The costs are there. We need to find, and this is a very good way. Collaborative delivery really brings it together, and you can deliver a better project faster and less expensive. It may not look at it up front, it may not look at, but when you do it and you look back, you will find it's a better project. So, I just encourage people to look into it. It's not perfect, and it's sometimes painful. There are painful points in it.
Right.
I never tell people it's not going to be any pain. It's a dirty, messy job, but somebody's got to do it.
Someone's gotta do it, yeah.
So that's what we're going. So just jump out and do it, and reach out and find people who've done it and learn from them. That's how I learned. That's how everybody learned.
That's the best way.
Yeah, it is.
Find people that know how to do it and learn from them. And
Well,
don't be afraid. I think we're always afraid of contractors thinking they're out to rip you off, but they're not. We're all in this together. We need to work together.
No.
We need future clients. So why would we rip you off?
Exactly.
You know.
Well, this has been great, guys. Let's bring it to a close. Colin, another great session.
Thanks.
Look forward to doing it
Appreciate
again.
Yeah, hopefully we
All
get
right.
to do it again. Thank you.
Thank you.